Okay, I'm ready to make the lining, and here I have my lining fabric, and I've just torn because this fabric tears nicely. You can cut, tear, whatever. Get yourself a 25-inch square. Okay, so you need a 25-inch square. So then what we're going to do is cut a 12-inch square out of the corner of that 25-inch square. So I'm going to show you a really easy way to do that. All you need to do is fold your 25-inch square on the diagonal. Okay, so get yourself a little point here. I mean, you can do it however you want to do it. You certainly don't have to go by my way, but I'm going to get myself folded so that there's a little point here, and then lined up neatly. If it's a square, an actual square, then it should actually line up neatly. Okay, now if I have a 25-inch square and I need to cut a 12-inch square out of it, that would mean that the remaining part should only be 13 inches, right? Because 25 minus 12 equals 13. Sometimes getting this to line up properly can be a bit of a pain if your fabric is a little warped, which does happen with fabric. Sometimes you just need to kind of manhandle it a bit. Alright, so I think I've got my fabric kind of back into shape here. Okay, now that we've done that, like I said, 25 minus 12 is 13. So if we need to cut off 12 inches up here, then that leaves 13 inches down here. So what I'm going to do is take my ruler, and again, you can see I want to cut off a 12-inch square from the corner. You can see that if I came down and I marked where 12 inches is, okay, then I could go down to this end and I could measure up from the 12 inches and say, hey, look, it's 13. Okay, so there we go. 12 inches down is the same as 13 inches up. I've marked it right here, and now I'm just going to go all the way over to almost where the 13 intersects with this fold right here, and mark that 13 again. So I have two dots to connect, this dot here and that dot there, and I'm just going to go ahead and connect them. Okay, now I just have to cut along this line. This you can use for something else. It'll probably work for one of our mini bags. But now if I take this and open it up, you can see I have my 25 inches. There is my 12-inch square cut out, and this side still has its 25 inches. So there you go. Nice, easy way to cut that 12-inch square out of your 25-inch square. All we're going to do now is take one of our long sides and fold it right sides together. Okay, so let me just show you that seam. Here we have a long side, one of our 25-inch sides, okay, and it is folded right sides together. And now I'm going to sew it with a 1/2-inch seam allowance. I'm going to start sewing in 1/2 inch from where the open ends are, and then I'm going to do a 1/2-inch seam allowance all the way to the fold. And I'm just going to sew all of that. Okay, I sewed that first seam. You can see I have, maybe you can, there we go. I have a 1/2-inch seam allowance, and I started sewing in 1/2 inch. So now what I'm going to do is kind of fold this little part away, just get it out of the way so that I can see right where I started sewing there, and I'm going to fold the other long end up. Okay, now I'm going to start sewing in the same spot. Okay, so what you might want to do, what I usually would do, is give this a good tug, make sure it's really pulled back right at that stitch. Okay, get it lined up, and then flip it over, and now sew from this side so I can insert, whoopsie. We want to make sure we stay together here. Okay, keep everything folded. But what I'll do is I will put my sewing machine needle in starting right here, right where that other end, that other side stopped or started. Put my sewing machine needle in right here, do a back stitch, then sew all the way down, then sew all the way down to the fold and do a back stitch there. So I start right here, back stitch all the way down to here, back stitch, 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay? Now I've sewn that seam, so I started right at that same 1/2 inch away spot and went all the way down to there, to the fold. Now you can see that it's kind of this funky little shape thing, and what you want to do is just grab these two corners that haven't been connected to anything and pull them up to make your little bag shape. Now this is the side that doesn't have any seams on it. If we turn it over, you can see this side does have our seams, and now we're going to just press those seams open. Okay, I have pressed those seams open. You can see I just did folded over the little triangles there at the end. Now, I also pressed down the unworked edges down just a 1/2 inch seam allowance, okay? And then when I got to this little point, I just folded one end over and pressed it, and then folded the other end over and pressed it. And that's perfectly fine for the point. Now, when you get to this inside point here, you're not going to be able to fold over without cutting a little slit down. Now, what I'm going to do is when I attach this lining into my bag, I'll just put a couple extra little hand stitches underneath there to make that really nice and secure so it doesn't rip, because if you give this a good tug, it will rip straight down. It'll just separate all the way down there. So you can either do a few hand stitches just back and forth under here when you're attaching it, or you can also just do some back stitching right here on your sewing machine, whichever way you want to do it. But you are going to want to do something to secure that just to be on the safe side, because that does become a weak point when you do that little clip. Now you can decide which side you want to put the pocket on. This is not the pocket. This is the pocket. All right, my pocket, I have an 11 inch across, 15 inch down. So if you have a fabric that has a clear up and down, you want to make sure it is 11 inches wide and 15 inches tall if you want that design to go up and down. Okay, so now what I'm going to do for the pocket, I'm not going to attach it just yet. First, I'm going to sew the pocket. I'm going to fold it in half. So instead of being 11 inches by 15 inches, it is now 11 inches by 7.5 inches. And I'm going to sew this with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start over here. I'm going to sew all the way down to here till I'm 1/2 inch away from the corner. And then I'm going to sew over with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Stop right about here, do a little back stitch, skip a couple inches, back stitch again to 1/2 inch away from the corner, and then all the way back up here, back stitch again. So I'll have an opening right in the middle of what will be the bottom. And then I can flip that around and press it. So I'm going to sew it, then I'll show it to you, then I'll flip it and press it, show it to you again, and then we will attach it. Here is my pocket all sewn. I started over here and stopped right there, then picked up again here, stopped here. Now by all means, you can start on one of the folds, go all the way down the side, all the way across the bottom, and then like halfway up the side and stop and have your opening be over here. First, I just like it better having my opening at the bottom, but you do you, okay? Now I am going to clip my corners so that I don't have big bulky messes when I fold my yarn over. I think you can see the thread on this side a little better here. So I'm just going to go ahead and clip a diagonal. You can see it's about a 1/16 to an 1/8 inch away from the actual sewn corner, and I just clipped that diagonal, not over there, and another one over here. Okay, there you go. You can see about a 1/16 to an 1/8 away from that corner. And then you don't need to clip these because they don't go back the other direction because of the fold. So now you go ahead and turn your work. Okay, so I've got my pocket all done here, and you can see that the direction of the pattern depends on which side of the pocket you're on. So you can see that these, the kind of spade, like in a card, the spade kind of points up here on this side, and if we flip it over, the little spade is pointing down on this side. So you just want to decide which way is up on your fabric. Sometimes it's not so much of a decision as an obvious thing. I'm going with this way being the up on my fabric. Now I'm going to sew a center line down my pocket, so it's actually 2 pockets. That's why I made it this wide. I wanted it to be 2 pockets. So the first thing, since I'm going to make this pocket have a center line, your pocket should be about 10 inches, and mine is. So the center of 10 is 5 inches. I'm just going to mark it up here at 5 inches. Then I'm going to go down here and mark it down here, mark the center down here, 5 inches, and then connect that line, connect those 2 dots to make the little center line. Okay, so that is the center of my pocket. So I'm sewing this onto the seamed side of my purse. And what I'm going to do, I'm happy with eyeballing it. You can feel free to, measure things and everything if that's what you need to do, but I'm just going to give it a couple little pins, and I'm making sure not to pin through to the bottom layer. When you sew this, you want to make sure you're not sewing into the other side of your lining, of your bag lining. You want to make sure you're not sewing onto this, okay? So be very careful when you do that. And another little trick, which I'm actually going to use here because I don't feel very secure about what I just did, is I stick this ruler, pardon me, I stick this nice plastic ruler inside my bag. So now I can pin this down onto one layer of the bag lining, but not onto the other layer of the bag lining. Now I'm going to slide it over here, and I'm going to pin down these 2 corners, again using that plastic ruler to keep myself from accidentally pinning where I don't want to. And then when you're sewing, you just, make sure that you only have the 1 layer in your sewing machine. You don't have the bottom layer of the lining in your sewing machine, and you'll be good. In order to sew this, I'm going to start over here. I'm going to do kind of a little triangle bit on the corner, and then come all the way down to this corner, then all the way across to this corner, up here, little triangle bit around there, back down again. Shouldn't be showing you that when I have pins in it. Across the bottom, back up the top, and a little triangle bit here. So I'll show you that. I'm gonna sew it, and then I will show it to you. Okay, my pocket is now attached, and I have that little triangle on the corner, and I actually did the little triangles in these corners as well, more because I find when there's that 90-degree point right there, it tends to just collect lint and everything anyway. So I just gave it a little 45-degree angle there, and then again I did 2 little triangles on that corner. When I got up to the top here, you can kind of see how I have the triangle right there on each side of my opening, and then the little triangle up over here too, and way down here. The reason I do the triangles on the top is it gives those little edges a more secure base. It's just one of those things you do that keeps your pocket less likely to just tear away at the top if you're, shoving things in and out. All right, so there is my little pocket. And now what you actually need to do is turn your bag lining back inside out, because that's the way it actually goes into your bag, right? Because it's actually the inside. of your bag like this. So I have now pinned the lining into the bag, and let me show you how I've done that. You'll notice that the bag has this little border that is gray, then yellow, then gray, and that's on both sides, gray, then yellow, then gray. And what I've done is pinned the lining in under that second gray stripe. So gray, yellow, gray, and then pinned in the lining just under that. And I started by pinning it in to these two corners. Okay, so here's the little strap. The points of the lining go at the little points just below the strap. And then I pinned the V's again under the gray, yellow, gray, and then the lining, and this V as well. And then I just kind of gave my purse a pull so that the lining was straight and pinned it in. You notice when you let go, the lining kind of gathers a little bit, just because, you know, that's kind of the way crochet items work. They grow and stretch and shrink and stretch and shrink, and that's one of the reasons why I like putting the fabric lining in them. So I'm just going to show you a little bit how I'm going to sew this in, and then you can just go ahead and follow along and get your lining sewn in. So I've got some quilting thread here. You can use whatever kind of sewing thread you want. I like quilting thread, it's nice and secure. I've got it doubled, a little knot sewn in, a little knot on the end. And now I'm just going to catch the bottom of these gray stitches and a little bit of my fabric. So the bottom of a gray stitch and a little speck of the fabric. Using the pins that I already put in there to make sure I'm doing this evenly. Bottom of the gray stitches, little piece of fabric, and just do that all the way around. And we'll just go in one big circle until you get back to where you started, and then your lining will be all sewn in. So here we go. And that's all it's going to take to sew in your lining. It'll be nice and secure at that point. And then when you get to the end, tie another knot. You may need more than one piece of thread. And then your bag will be complete. And we'll go ahead and put the little extra bags in if you would like to do that as well.